It wasn't meant to be about the money, and that's why this hurts. But before I get into this, I just want to say how much I enjoy the stories on your channel. It's amazing to find out that I'm not the only one who has made some very silly decisions, because I thought I was in love with a girl from the Philippines. I want to share what I did on your channel in the hopes that maybe some other guy who thinks he's in love with someone from the Philippines can see if his girlfriend has some of the same traits that my wife had. I think it's admirable that you have a place where people can share stories. If I had this available to me when I first started thinking about the Philippines, I might not have done what I did. But I did what I did before YouTube had gained the popularity that it has now, and there was no one warning anyone of the dangers of falling in love with the Philippines. I do want to stress that I have a buddy of mine who was married to a Filipina for years and has a house with her in Cebu, and they seem to have a fantastic relationship. It's also possible, so don't write it off as being impossible, but it's very difficult and highly unlikely, and that's what I found out in my own personal experience. If there were videos I could have watched, would I have done things differently? If I'm being truthful of myself, I think I would have still got married. But when I started picking up on things earlier on, I would have done and changed things more quickly. It's the same case that many guys had to accept, I suppose. I was married in America. We got married young, 3 wonderful kids, and I expected that we would be together forever. 30 years later, I had come home from work one day, and she'd packed all the bags saying she's found someone else. As you can imagine, this was a shock. As far as I was concerned, this came out of nowhere and it wasn't expected. But she'd been seeing this other guy behind my back for over a year, and she made the decision after our kids left home that she wanted to leave me. Divorce, loss of half of everything I'd earned in my life, and now a very bitter and angry person. I had no idea what to do. Up until that point, we were only a few years away from retirement, but splitting the money into 2, it was daunting to realize that my money that I had left would still see me working for the next 10 years. I was 52 at this moment, and my ex-wife was the same, and there was nothing I could see her doing to make me think that she would do what she did. I still struggle to come to terms with her deceit. It's just one of those things you have to live with. That brings me back to talking about my friend, the guy who was married to someone from the Philippines and actually lived in the Philippines at this point. He married her when he was young and when she was young and brought her to live in the States, and they recently retired to the Philippines. When I told him about what had happened with my wife, he said, "Get yourself to the Philippines as quickly as you can, and you'll understand that you might have what you want there, and you only need half as much money to be able to retire in the Philippines." Up until then, I'd never thought about going to the Philippines. I knew nothing about it. The only place I'd ever been that wasn't in the States was Canada, and the thought of leaving and going somewhere different, it actually made me very apprehensive. Initially, I told him I'd think about it, but I never actually thought I would go. I kind of felt like the Philippines was a plan C. Plan A didn't work out, and that was me being married to my ex-wife, but I hadn't found out what plan B was going to be yet. You find yourself filing your taxes, sending a load of money to the government that you should be saving instead, and then you start reading online about the Philippines. Unfortunately, there was nowhere near as much information as there was today. There was some, but it was only a fraction of what you find today, especially with the likes of YouTube. But what I got from this was that the Philippines was far cheaper than the States. Cheaper for property, for food, insurance, it was just cheaper. And my buddy said it would be half the cost I was thinking I needed in America, so perhaps I could actually retire now. I was getting bored at work. When you feel like you only have a few years left, it was bearable, and I actually enjoyed the time I spent there. It wasn't a dull job, but what I did most of my life and what I dreamt of doing was to retire. But the problem was, I now found myself in this situation that I was no longer able to retire in America because of what my ex-wife did. And it seemed like I was 10 years away from retirement in America at this point, so many years to accept also wouldn't have given me the retirement I would have actually wanted. It would have been very, very basic. But that was the first time I started considering the Philippines as an actual plan. I felt the only thing I could do would be to go and have a look first. I would have to go and see what it was like when I was there on the ground. I wasn't just about to move there, but visiting, going for a look. Why don't I go, see what it was like? It just so happened that my vacation time was coming up and I hadn't actually used it yet. So I was at home one day and at the weekend nothing to do, bored senseless, and I booked to go to the Philippines for 3 weeks in only a month's time. When I told my buddy I'd booked, he said I had to go to Cebu to meet up with him and he'd show me some of the ropes. I felt that because my buddy lived there, I wasn't going in completely to the unknown. I would have someone there for support if needed. When I arrived in Manila and got in a taxi at the airport to my hotel, I felt completely out of place and like I'd made a bad decision. It was so crazy hot and the traffic was endless and it took hours to get to the hotel. It didn't help that we arrived at rush hour, but I felt a sense of unease out of the place. I tried to put those feelings to the back of my mind and keep an open mind before I wrote off the Philippines completely. I got to the hotel that I booked and went up to my room, and at that point, I'm thinking, why don't I just change the ticket and go back home? But I did try to pull myself together, just go out, have something to eat, maybe go for a beer, and then come to a decision tomorrow. Don't rush into things. My initial feelings changed a full 360 when I did leave the hotel. I was staying in Makati, and it was close to the famous nightlife street I'd read about briefly online before I left. I just thought I had to go into some of the bars for a look. I had a meal on that street which was great and it was affordable too. That was the first point when I thought if this was a reflection of what the Philippines actually was, I could stop working right now if this was the case. The beers were cheap, and I went to some of the bars along P. Burgos Street because you just had to, and that was my first introduction to the famous Philippines nightlife, and I loved it. I more than loved it. I didn't want to go back to America anymore. I had such a good time in Manila over that week that I was coming close to thinking I might as well just move here because I could actually afford it. I looked at places to rent on one of the days I was there, and with what I had, I would be able to live a reasonable life in the Philippines. I could give up working right now, and that did excite me. I went to meet my buddy in Cebu, and I found that place was quite a lot different to Manila, which I hadn't expected it to be. The beaches there were some of the best I'd seen, but I suppose I didn't really have many beaches to compare them to, being to ones only in America before, so it might not be a difficult thing to beat them. I even went to look at my friend's house. He had that together with his wife, and it was quite amazing really for what it was. A really awesome place, and he told me it didn't cost him a lot of money to build. And he also said that this is one of the things that attracted him to the Philippines, the ability to have something like this. What would I be doing back in America right now? I'd be working, saving money, but now I didn't need more money because I could live in the Philippines right now with what I had. And that made me feel, and I'm going to say it, happy again for the first time since my wife decided to leave me and take half my things. I met this really awesome girl in Cebu when I was there. I didn't keep in touch with her when I left, but if that was anything to go by when it came to Filipinas, I could see myself with a beautiful young wife who could take care of me long into my old age. I was under the illusion that Filipinas preferred men twice their age. And I know it was an illusion that I'm not sure where it came from, because if I looked at my buddy and his wife, there was only a 2-year age gap between them. But the thing was, he met her years ago when he was young and she was young. Perhaps I should have paid closer attention to that. But at this moment in time, I was interested in girls in their late 20s and I was in my early 50s. At the time, I just thought that is how relationships in the Philippines were meant to be. I thought that if I looked for someone closer to my age, I would have looked stupid. I had a wonderful time with her, but as I did say, I didn't keep in touch with her when I left. When I finally got back home, I did decide that there was nothing keeping me there anymore. My kids had grown up and left home and already finished college. I didn't have any family close by, and if I continued to work, I would be missing out on the chance of living somewhere else and doing something very different and unique. It didn't take long for me to come to the decision that I was actually going to move to the Philippines. I was no way close to being able to retire in America, because at this point I would say I had savings approaching $400,000. It should have been close to $1 million if I was still married, but that's just how much my wife devastated me. That million would have been enough for us both to have a good time in retirement. 400,000, I was led to believe, was enough for me to have a good time in retirement in the Philippines, not in America. The thing was, though, I was actually really good with that, because what I saw in the Philippines was so much better than what I thought possible. And I also thought I was going to find a new wife, and that was meant to be great. I was hoping to find a young and beautiful wife and show her off to my ex-wife that I didn't need her anymore. I know that was a silly thing to do, but it did cross my mind. I didn't know where to move in the Philippines. I just thought I would fly to Manila and take it from there. I did really like the island of Cebu. I felt like it was a bit more laid back than Manila, but it did have a big city vibe in certain areas and it had the beaches, and it was just a wonderful place. I thought about staying in Manila, renting an apartment, and I even thought about exploring some of the lesser known islands to see if I could find my own unique paradise where nobody else would be. But when I left America at that moment in time, it was my intention to never, ever return. This time, when I landed in Manila and got in the taxi to the hotel, I found the whole thing extremely exciting. It wasn't like the first time when I was really nervous and hating everything about it. I loved how busy it was, I loved how much it was so different to America, and I loved the fact I was probably not going to have to work another day in my life. It's a difficult thing to describe retirement. It's what everybody is working towards. But when you're actually there and your mind tells you never need to work another day in your life, you start to feel really good about yourself, like you're finally in a position to do what you always wanted to do, and that's how I felt when I got to Manila. I spent a good week looking around places to rent in a few of the different parts of the city, enjoying the nightlife and speaking to other expats that I met up with. Although there were lots of fantastic apartments within my budget, I did come to the conclusion that Manila, although a great place to visit and spend time in, might not be where I wanted to live full time. It was a bit draining, and all the traffic made it quite tiring. Because my friend lived in Cebu, logically, I thought I would go down there. I flew down, checked into a hotel, and spent the first few days just having a good time, enjoying myself. I wasn't thinking about anywhere to rent yet. I just wanted to enjoy myself while I was there, and that was it. After a few days, though, of really enjoying myself, the nightlife mainly, and everything else that went along with it, I started looking for places to rent. There were so many different options. There were even options that weren't apartments in Cebu, in the areas I was looking at. In Manila, if you wanted something that wasn't an apartment, it was going to be a lot more expensive, or it wasn't going to be the type of place you'd actually want to live in. In Cebu, however, I'm finding that I could even rent a small house, not too far away from a nice beach for a couple of $100s a month. My budget was $20,000 a year to live on. That might not sound like a lot, but I was working on 5% of my savings, so I didn't have to eat into it, and $20,000 a year in the Philippines was a lot of money. I'd been in Cebu for about a week, and my friend came to the city, and I'm telling him of my plans, and it's great to have a contact in the Philippines to help me learn and understand some of the basics. He never warned me about the girls, though. I think because he'd been married to his wife for such a long time, he never experienced any of the negatives that came along with things such as getting involved with someone who was a lot younger than you. I wish, though, that he had warned me. I found a place to rent close to a beach and I took it over for only $220 a month. It wasn't a lot. And at this point, I'm really enjoying myself. When I write that now, when I think about that time and the fact I was retired, it was such a fantastic feeling. I'd been living in my place for a few weeks. I got my budget all in order, so I knew how much I should spend, how many times I could go out, and it was actually going a lot further than I expected it to. That was until I met a girl. I always thought that when I did get to the Philippines, I would find someone special. I missed having company. I didn't really like being alone all the time, and the fact I was in the Philippines and the girls were so beautiful, and I was still under the impression that they preferred men at least twice their age. When I met a girl on the beach and started talking with her, I thought this was perfectly normal. She did seem that she was into me. She seemed really into me, and I was definitely into her. She was 31. I didn't think that difference between age was too much. I was in my 50s, but it's not like she was 21. She was from Cebu, being the fact that that's where we were, and it started out just normal. She was there at the beach with some of her friends, and I walked up and just said hi. They all started smiling and giggling to each other, and one of the girls says hi to me, but I didn't take my eye contact away from the girl I wanted to talk to. I said hi to her again, and then she said hi back to me. I reached out my hand to shake hers and I introduced myself. And then from there, we found ourselves arranging to meet up later that evening for a date. I didn't get her number or anything along those lines. I just said I could meet her at a specific restaurant at 8 p.m. that evening. I promised I'd be there and said if she wanted to come, it's a date. I didn't know if she would show up or not, but the fact she did made me feel like I was young again. Looking back, I wish that she never showed up. But we can't change things. I never really felt the way I felt before, though, with her. I didn't think I ever felt that way when I was married to my first wife. We were both young and got married straight out of school, so there was no hope of that dating kind of situation that many people had. Perhaps because I'd been married to only one lady for such a long time, I never thought that I was too old to be in the situation that I found myself in. I was just feeling young again and alive again. I didn't need to go to work, and it was just a perfect situation, or I thought it was, and I felt it was. As time went on, we're meeting up more regularly. She's coming to my place often and spending the night. When I asked if I could go to her place, it was always a big no. She lived with her family in a village quite a long way away, but when she came to the city, she stayed with friends and now me. We casually dated for a month. I found out everything about her. She said she'd never been married before, but she hoped to get married at some point. She said she'd never have children before, but she did hope to have children. I didn't know how to react to that. I already had kids that were grown up, and the thought of having more was something that I definitely didn't want. I told her that, and I think she was happy to continue with the relationship even after I told her. A few months later, she was permanently living with me. She'd moved into my place, and she wasn't working. She said when we met she was between jobs, and I never actually saw her work, but I was retired and I wanted someone to spend my time with. I didn't want someone who I couldn't see all the time and all day who was out working, so it suited me very well that she didn't work. Right about now, at this moment in time, I feel like my life is complete. I was retired, living in an awesome place, awesome girlfriend, enough money to not want for anything, and I was in this great country that I'd only just found out about not long ago. I wasn't rich by any stretch of the imagination, but I had enough money to be able to go out and eat every single day and go for drinks and enjoy the nightlife when I wanted to. And I had enough money to look after my girlfriend. It just kind of happened that after a few months I started giving her an allowance so that she could go out and buy her own food and the things she wanted. It wasn't a lot of money, but if she wasn't working, where else was she going to get money from? I didn't see it as meaning she was only there for the money, because at that moment she wasn't getting much. I was giving her $200 a month, and that's not affecting my life at all. I can continue as I was before, but I'm also paying for everything when we go out together, which is exactly as I expected it to be anyway, so I don't see what I'm doing with her as any cause for concern. This goes on for a whole year. It could have been longer than a year, but life was just going by, and I'm finally starting to really enjoy myself. Probably the most I'd enjoyed myself since my ex-wife had had enough of me. Over that year, I gave her $200 a month, and that was it. She never asked for anything else, never once asked for even $1 extra. She was always respectable and loving and kind, and I can't remember if it was exactly a year or a year and 3 months or 8 months. I can't remember exactly, but she came to me with an emergency. How many times have you heard that? An emergency. Because this was the first time in a year that she'd actually asked for anything over her allowance. There was nothing for me to think like it wasn't her being honest. What was this emergency? I can't remember what it was about. I've been sat here for 30 minutes trying to remember, but I can't think back to what it actually was. But it doesn't matter anyway. I can't remember what she wanted, but it was around $1,000. And because she'd never asked me before, I gave it to her, and she used it for whatever she used it for, and things got back to normal as soon as I gave it to her. A couple of months later, it's on a Saturday and we're sat in a beach bar, and she looks a bit down. She never usually looked down, and she looked at me and said, "Why don't you want to marry me?" That took me by surprise when she said that. I'd not thought about getting married yet, and I asked her what her feelings are when it comes to getting married. She said because she was around 20 years younger than I was, she wanted to be able to commit to me, but if anything happened to me, what would happen to her? I must agree that I felt a bit hurt when she said that initially, but when I actually thought about it, it did make a bit of sense. If something happened to me and she'd given me 10 years of her life, then all of a sudden I'm not there anymore. She wouldn't have anything to show for it. But I didn't know if getting married was the best idea, and I just said to her, if things are still going well in another 6 months, we can talk about it. And I felt like she was really happy to go along with that. So those 6 months pass without incident, and she doesn't ask for any more money during those 6 months. She used to occasionally go and visit her family, but I never went along with her. I didn't like the idea of meeting her family at this point, or having to stay in that rudimentary accommodation, to put it politely. But true to my word, when 6 months had passed and I was still happy with her, I did bring it up, and we decided that we would actually get married. That was a process that I never want to go through again, endless paperwork and back and forth to get everything that we needed. But eventually, we had it all in order, and we registered our marriage. Getting married to me was a very big thing, and I wanted to go on a honeymoon somewhere with her. We settled on the idea of visiting Malaysia. I didn't know much about Malaysia, but I had spoken to a few guys who had been, and they said it was fantastic. Very different to the Philippines, and that's what I thought was important. My wife was really excited to go, and this being her first time leaving the Philippines, and we had 2 awesome weeks in Kuala Lumpur and Penang. The food in Malaysia was awesome. Such a mix of different cuisines, and I wished I could take the food back to the Philippines with me. Our honeymoon was fantastic, and we returned to the Philippines and started living our married life. Months are going by, and that's a guess. I would say 2 months or 3 months, or it could have even been 4. I can't recall exactly, but she starts talking about because we're married now, we need our own place to live in. I told her that I had a certain amount of money that provides a certain income, and I can't eat into those savings in order to buy a place. But if something happens to me, you will get the money. I didn't tell her how much it was or where it was saved, but I thought that was a fair explanation. The problem was, though, she didn't agree with me. She said we should spend at least some of the money to buy a house. I told her that I would think about it, but I'm not going to be doing anything now because if we had a house, we wouldn't have as much income. Then she came up with the thing that I've heard time and time again. Well, we wouldn't need to pay for rent. But then I said the rent's only $200 a month, so that means if we were to buy somewhere, we couldn't spend more than $48,000 because that's how much I would have to replace to save it. When we looked at places that were of interest, most of them were a lot more expensive than that. She said she understood, and she saw that it did make sense. Time goes on, and we're just living what I think is a good life. The type of life that anybody would dream of. I think she's happy. But after another year, she's talking about a house again. This time it's urgent. We need it, she says. I didn't agree with her. I even said to her that if something happens to me, you can buy a house. But it doesn't make sense for us to buy a house that costs, for example, $120,000. That was the price of one that we went to look at that was actually something we could see ourselves living in. I tried to explain to her that this would reduce our income and make us not have as much money to spend, and we wouldn't be able to live the same life that we did now. But to her, having a house was more important. I tried to put my foot down and told her I'm not going to be buying a house. But I did say, let's leave it 5 years, and when I get older, in 5 years' time maybe, we can look at it then. I was still at an age where I wanted to be out doing things and enjoying myself, and I wanted to be able to enjoy myself with her. Because of that, I don't think it's the right thing to buy a house now. She said she understood, and she stopped talking about it. But from then on, she was asking for money that wasn't just her allowance. The first few times, I just went with it. A couple of hundred here, 1,000 there, but then she starts asking for more. I really don't know what her game is at this point, but we've been married a bit, she had her allowance and she could visit her family often and she didn't have to work. But she was always asking for more, and a lot more. This was only a new part of her that I hadn't seen before, but I'm not thinking too much of it as of yet. I am just going along with her small demands for money because it's not a lot and it's not causing me any hurt. But when she came to me, saying her family's house was damaged due to a freak weather incident. Those were her actual words. She asked for $5,000 to fix it for them. I said, okay, as long as you take me to look at this damage. Although we were married, I'd never been to visit her family. She had tried to get me to go a few times, but I didn't really want to be involved with it. I wanted to separate myself from them and their lives. But when she told me this, there was no way I was giving her the money unless what she said actually did happen. So she said, fine, we can go in a week. Can they wait an extra week? I asked her, and she said, they're staying with friends at the moment, so it would be fine. So we eventually turned up a week later, and it was a very comical scene. If I think back, her parents' house was lying in what was meant to be ruins, but all the other houses next to them seemed to be okay. She explained that they'd just been unlucky because her parents' house wasn't built very well, but if I look back, I think that house that was made of very poor materials was simply taken apart and the walls and roof laid on top of each other so it looked like a weather incident. But I did give her the $5,000 so she could fix her parents' house. When I think about this, I'm not sure if because I wasn't going to buy a house like she wanted me to, she was trying to get more money out of me in different ways. But I didn't think that that's what she was doing. But in that moment, I just saw it as a one-off ask, and I went along with it because I didn't know what else to do. I told her I wouldn't be able to help again because this would affect our income. I even said our income to make her understand that the money was coming in was for both of us, not just for me, and we both had to live on it the way that we needed to. The sad thing was, though, she did ask for more money not long after. I can't remember what this was for either, unfortunately, but she wanted a couple of thousand. At this point, I am starting to get very upset. We had a strict budget to live on, and the budget was for us to enjoy ourselves, pay rent, give her an allowance, go out to eat at restaurants as often as possible, and have money to be able to do what we wanted to do. There was no part of this budget that was allocated for her to get big sums of money on demand, but she kept asking for money, and all I could say to her was, this is the last time, every time. But I said that to her many times, and she thought that it didn't matter, or that I didn't mean it. When she came back again for a couple of $1,000s, I had to put my foot down, and this time say no. The usual starts happening. She starts saying, you don't love me anymore, you don't care about me or my family anymore, I'm your wife, you should take care of me properly. All this trying to guilt-trip me into giving her more money. She couldn't understand. She couldn't get it into her head that we had a certain income to live on, and that's what we had. If we spent more than that, that would mean our income would go down. But she didn't get that into her mind, and all she wanted was money at this point. How can she have stayed with me for 3 or 4 years and not demanded anything? And now, as I get more comfortable with her, as I love her more, and I feel like she's an irreplaceable part of my life, then she starts asking for money. I'm starting to get cold feet on the decisions I've made at this point, and then I start talking to expats who have also married Filipinas. That's when I started hearing all the horror stories as to what happened to other people. Demands for money, parents need money, school fees need paying, anything in order to extract money from you. I didn't see this at all until now. She brought up again about buying a house. And at this point, I'm starting to think that her being with me was purely for financial benefit. She might have been fantastic at acting. She was a good actor, but there was no logical sense for her asking for money from me because that would affect her income as well. I don't understand why she didn't understand this, but she was more interested in the now, get as much as she can now, not about making sure she's going to be okay in 20 years' time. This was the beginning of the end of our relationship. When I told her that her recent actions have really made me think that she doesn't love me and she's not with me for the proper reasons, and I think you need to explain yourself, she didn't say anything. She just said she couldn't help it when emergencies came up. And when I tried to say, what would you do if you were not with me when an emergency came up and you had no chance of getting the money? She just said she didn't know. We lasted another 6 months, and she was always asking for money, and I was too weak not to give it to her. But I saw it was going on to affect my income if I didn't stop. So when that 6 months came up, I told her, I'm not giving you any more money. Then she came and asked for money again only a few weeks later, and this time I just said no. A firm no. Big argument, big fights, not physical but verbal, and she walks out. Talk about being shocked. I wasn't expecting that. but it was pretty obvious that she was just playing the long game with me. Now, she could have pretended to have been happy and in love with me for all those years. I'm not sure how. But she did, and I don't know how she did. But as soon as I told her I wasn't going to build a house or buy a house, and then she started asking for money, I was giving it to her in the early stages. But it got to the point where I just couldn't continue if I wanted to continue my retirement in the Philippines. We separated not long after, and she was still trying to get money out of me up until the last day. But everything I had was in the States, apart from 3 months' worth of living that I transferred in, so she couldn't do anything about it. When she realized I was serious, that staying with me now perhaps was not going to be good for her, she started to actually try to change back, realizing that staying with me might be the better option. But I already knew that she was only interested in money, and the fact that she was trying to play a very long game with me to get everything I had. I did decide it would be better to leave my money to my children, not to her. That's my story of getting married in the Philippines. I wouldn't do it again. I can't because we are still married and it's very difficult to separate or do anything in the Philippines with regards to divorce because divorce is not allowed. But years later, I am still living there. Casual relationships are the way to go. I simply can't trust anyone anymore after what she did. I've heard it on other stories that some guys have actually built houses and things wouldn't stop there. Even if I built a house, it would have been more things that she wanted, more requests and more demands. Ultimately, I could have lost everything, so I'm happy that I didn't, but I really loved her, and that's what hurts the most. I was madly in love with her, and I thought we were going to stay together forever. But at that moment, I had it in my will that she would get everything. But now she's getting nothing. And although it looked like she was playing the long game, she wasn't prepared to play the really long game and wait for me to die. If she did, I wouldn't have known who she really was. But I wouldn't have known anything anyway, so it wouldn't have mattered. I bet I lost about $30,000. Not a fortune, but it was still money I should still have. That would include everything I gave to her and things I spent on her, over her allowance and over things when we went out together to eat. This was money I gave her directly. This was money for the house and everything that she asked for, and it was a lot over and above what I should have spent. But luckily, I was strong enough to actually understand what was going on before it was too late because I could have lost a lot more. I would just say be very careful in the Philippines because you never know what's going to happen. You never know what the motive of the girls are. It's very, very important to be as careful as you possibly can be.